Welcome to another deep dive. We're going to be looking at something pretty incredible today, AI-generated faces.
And not just any AI-generated faces. These are so real, they fooled, well, pretty much everyone.
Yeah, imagine you show up for a meeting, right? And it's all about AI image generation, the hot topic of the moment.
And you can't tell which faces in the room are real and which are made by a computer.
Seriously, we're at that level now.
It's pretty mind-blowing.
It is.
We're going to be taking excerpts from this research paper. It's called A Style-Based Generator Architecture for Generative Adversarial Networks.
Okay.
And it's basically changed how these hyper-realistic faces are created.
Okay, so I think we've all seen AI-generated images floating around. Some are impressive, some are, well,
Questionable.
yeah, questionable. So why is it that those earlier attempts weren't so convincing?
Well, they use what's called Generative Adversarial Networks, or GANs.
GANs, right.
And they had their limitations.
Okay, so this research helps us understand why those older GANs fell a bit short.
Exactly. You see, traditional GANs, they were kind of like a one-trick pony. They could create images, yeah, but they didn't really have much control over the details.
Right.
And so they often got stuck in these repetitive patterns, which made it pretty obvious they were artificial. Imagine, like an ad campaign where every face looks eerily similar. That was the risk with those older GANs.
I see. So you could spot the AI's fingerprints, so to speak.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm starting to get why this new research is such a big deal then. They're calling it a style-based generator?
Right.
Did they get that idea from somewhere else?
They did. They took inspiration from style transfer techniques.
Okay.
So they break down creating a face into these controllable styles.
Styles.
Yeah, think of it like you're in Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got all these sliders for pose, identity, hair, even freckles.
Oh, wow.
That's the kind of fine-grained manipulation this new generator can do.
Wow. So you're saying, like, I could actually tweak the smile intensity or the hair curliness of a generated face.
You got it.
That's insane. So how does it actually work, though?
Well, this is where it gets really cool. They use a spiral space called WA.
Okay.
Think of it as like having all those Photoshop sliders, but for a face.
Mm-hmm.
It maps the input data into this W space,
Mm-hmm.
and that allows for a much more organized representation of all the features.
W space. Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
It is a bit abstract.
Yeah.
Imagine like tangled headphones.
Okay, yeah.
That's the old way, traditional latent space,
Yeah,
total mess.
right.
Now imagine taking those headphones and winding them neatly around individual schools.
Okay,
That's the W space.
gotcha.
This organization, this disentanglement, that's what makes it so much easier to control each aspect of the face.
That's a great analogy, actually. So by organizing everything in this W space, the generator has way more control. But what about the noise I keep hearing about with AI? Where does that fit in?
Yes, noise. Yeah, it might seem counterintuitive, but noise is actually a key part of making these faces look real. It's not a bug, it's a feature.
Hold on. Noise, like static in a photo? That kind of noise?
Yeah, but you see, by injecting noise at different levels of the network, it introduces those little variations that make a face, human.
Like what kind of variations?
Like individual hair strands, skin pores, even tiny wrinkles. It's like those final touches on a painting.
So it's not just about creating this perfectly smooth, generic face.
Nope.
It's the imperfections that make us, well, us.
Exactly.
That's pretty clever. But how do they stop the noise from messing up the entire picture?
Well, that's the amazing thing. The network is smart enough to apply that noise only where it matters. It leaves the big features, like the identity or the pose, untouched.
So they're basically teaching the AI to be messy, but in just the right way.
You could say that.
Like organized chaos? But how do we know this whole approach is actually better than the old GANs?
Well, they thought of that. They developed new metrics.
Okay.
They call them perceptual path length and linear separability.
Catchy.
And these basically measure how well the generator separates different features.
So it's like a report card for the AI, seeing how well it keeps those sliders we talked about organized.
Exactly. These metrics let you compare different generators and see objectively how effective the style-based approach is. And trust me, the results are pretty convincing.
Okay, you've definitely piqued my curiosity. So how much better are the images from this new generator compared to the old GANs? Like night and day?
Oh yeah, remember those robot face glitches we mentioned?
How, yeah.
Yeah, you can pretty much say goodbye to those with this new generator. The images are just way better. even when you're generating those tricky details, like glasses and hats.
So it's not just about more control, it actually produces better images overall. This is getting wild. I can already see why everyone's so excited about this in the AI world, but I have a feeling we've only scratched the surface here.
Oh yeah, we've only just begun. We've got the basics down, but now we need to think about what this tech means for, well, for all of us.
Hmm.
If we can't tell real faces from fake ones, what does that mean for everything else?
Whoa, things just got real.
Right. It's like we're stepping into some sci-fi movie where you can't even trust your own eyes.
We're going to need to unpack all of that.
Definitely.
But first, let's get back to the research itself. They used a really interesting data set to train this generator, right?
Absolutely. They use something called FFQ.
FFHQ.
Stands for Flickr Faces HHQ. It's a data set with 70,000 high-quality images of faces.
70,000.
Yep. Huge range of ages, ethnicities, even accessories.
That's a lot of faces. Why did they choose that particular data set, though?
The diversity is key. They wanted to make sure their generator could create all kinds of faces, not just some generic human face. They needed a data set that reflected the real world, and FFHQ was perfect for that.
So they basically gave the AI a crash course in human diversity, training it on a data set that represents how we actually look in all our, complexity.
Precisely. And it worked. The faces it produces aren't just hyper-realistic, they're incredibly diverse. They capture those little differences in facial structure, skin tones, hairstyles. It's amazing.
This is incredible, but I gotta admit, I'm also feeling a bit, I don't know, uneasy. Like, if AI can create faces this realistic, what's stopping someone from using this for, well, for bad stuff?
That's a huge question, and we can't ignore it. The potential for misuse is real. Imagine someone creating a fake video of, say, a politician, making them say or do something inflammatory. That could have a real impact, on public opinion, even elections.
It's like we're entering this world where seeing is no longer believing. It's exciting and terrifying all at the same time. So what can we do to protect ourselves? I mean, how do we even know what's real anymore?
That's the million-dollar question. We need to figure out ways to spot these deepfakes, to authenticate real content. Researchers are already working on it, developing algorithms that can analyze videos and find those tiny inconsistencies that give away the fakes.
So it's like a digital arms race? As AI gets better at making these fakes, we need to get better at spotting them.
It's a challenge, for sure. But there's another side to it, too. It's about media literacy.
Okay.
We need to learn how to be more critical of the stuff we see online, to be aware of the potential for manipulation.
Makes sense. We need to be smarter about what we consume, especially online.
Can we switch gears for a second? I want to go back to those evaluation metrics we talked about earlier. Do you think they play a role in all of this, like in mitigating the risks?
The perceptual path length?
Yeah.
And linear separability metrics.
Yeah, those ones.
Yeah, absolutely. By focusing on this idea of disentanglement, you can start to assess how controllable a generator is and therefore, its potential for misuse. So if a generator scores high on these metrics, it means it has more control over those individual facial features, which could make it easier to create those really specific, convincing deepfakes.
That's one way to look at it. But they can also be used to guide us towards more responsible AI.
Okay.
By understanding how disentanglement affects the potential for misuse, researchers can design generators that are, well, less prone to being used for bad stuff.
That's good to hear. It's reassuring to know people are thinking about these ethical questions from the beginning. This whole conversation has been, I don't know, a bit overwhelming. It's like we're looking into this future that's both amazing and unsettling.
I get it. It's a lot to take in. But we have to remember that the future isn't set in stone. We can shape it. We need to talk about these things, openly and honestly, to develop safeguards, ethical guidelines, and to build a culture of responsible innovation.
You're right. We can't just pretend this isn't happening. We need to face these challenges head on. So where do we go from here? What are some concrete steps we can take to navigate all of this?
Well, we need to support the research. For one, research into deepfake detection and content authentication.
Right.
We also need to advocate for policies that promote responsible AI. And most importantly, we need to educate ourselves and others about what this technology can do, the good and the bad.
This is a call to action for all of us, isn't it? We need to be informed, we need to be engaged, and we need to be proactive. This isn't just about technology, it's about our values, our ethics, and our responsibility for the future.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think that brings us back to this research paper we've been talking about.
Yeah.
The authors didn't just create groundbreaking technology, they started a conversation. They knew that scientific progress has to go hand in hand with ethical considerations.
It's a good reminder that innovation without responsibility is, well, it's like a car without brakes. Powerful, but potentially dangerous. We need to make sure we're steering this technology in the right direction. Before we wrap up, though, I have one more question about the research itself. Didn't they actually create the FFHQ dataset themselves?
You're right, they did. Creating FFHQ was a huge contribution in itself. It wasn't just about grabbing a bunch of images. They had to carefully curate the data set to make sure it was diverse and high quality.
So they didn't just revolutionize how these AI-generated faces are made, they actually provided the ingredients to train those AI models. That's pretty impressive.
It really shows how important data is in AI. The quality of the data directly affects the quality of the results. And in this case, the researchers really went above and beyond to create a data set that would push the limits of what's possible.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. This isn't just about creating realistic faces, it's about building the foundation for a future where AI can be a force for good.
Exactly. And I think that's a perfect segue into our final thoughts on this deep dive. We've covered a lot, from the nuts and bolts of this new generator to the ethics of hyperrealistic AI. But what does it all mean for you, the listener?
That's the question, isn't it? We've looked at the how, but now we need to grapple with the why. What are you going to take away from this? What will you do with this new knowledge?
Well, for starters, think about entertainment.
Okay.
Imagine creating these uh, incredibly lifelike characters for movies or video games or even, virtual reality.
Yeah, it would totally change how those experiences feel, make them way more immersive.
Exactly.
Okay, I can see that. No more clunky CGI.
Right.
But what about something closer to home, you know?
Yeah.
Are there any uses for this that could actually, like, impact our daily lives?
Absolutely. Think about personalized learning. Like, imagine AI could generate these realistic avatars for, say, online tutors
Oh,
or
interesting.
even language learning partners. It could make those experiences way more engaging.
That's fascinating. So instead of just staring at a screen, you could actually have this, like, virtual face-to-face conversation with your AI tutor.
Exactly. It'd be like having a personal coach right there with you.
But wait, couldn't the same technology also be used to create, like, those super convincing deepfakes?
Right.
Isn't that, like, a major concern?
We can't ignore that. The potential for misuse is definitely there. Imagine someone creates a fake video of a politician saying or doing something, really inflammatory. That could have a huge impact.
Yeah, it could change public opinion. It could even swing elections. It's like we're entering this world where, like, seeing is no longer believing.
Right.
It's both exciting and terrifying at the same time. So what can we even do? How do we protect ourselves from that kind of manipulation?
That's the big question, isn't it? We need tools, we need techniques to be able to tell what's real and what's fake. And researchers are working on it.
Yeah.
They're developing these algorithms that can analyze videos and find those subtle little clues that give away a deep fake.
So it's like a constant back and forth then. As AI gets better at creating fakes, we need to get better at spotting them.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but I'm optimistic. There's
Yeah.
also a big push for media literacy,
Yeah. Right.
teaching people how to think critically about what they see online, to be aware of the possibility of manipulation.
That makes a lot of sense. We can't just blindly trust everything we see anymore.
Exactly.
Okay, let's shift gears for a moment. I want to circle back to those evaluation metrics we were talking about earlier, the perceptual path length and the linear separability.
Right.
Do you think they could help with all this, like with mitigating the risks of this technology?
Oh, absolutely. By focusing on disentanglement, you get a way to assess how controllable a generator is. And that gives you an idea of, well, how easily it could be misused.
So if a generator scores high on those metrics, it means it has really fine-grained control over those features, and that could make it easier to create really convincing deepfakes.
Yeah, that's one way to think about it.
Yeah.
But these metrics can also help us steer AI in a better direction.
Okay, how so?
Well, by understanding how disentanglement relates to misuse, researchers can design generators that are less likely to be used for harmful purposes.
That's good to hear. It means we can be proactive, not just reactive. I gotta say, though, this whole conversation has been a bit overwhelming. It's like we're standing on the edge of something totally new, and it's both exhilarating and kind of scary.
I know what you mean. It's a lot to process, but the future isn't set in stone. We can't shape it. We need to be open about these issues, have those tough conversations, and figure out how to develop safeguards ethical guidelines, and foster a culture of responsible AI development.
You're right. We can't just bury our heads in the sand. We have to face these challenges head on. So, what can we do? What are some tangible steps we can take to navigate this new territory?
Well, for one, we need to support research into deepfake detection. We need to be able to tell what's real.
Okay.
We also need to push for policies that promote responsible AI development and use.
Right.
And maybe, most importantly, we need to educate ourselves and others about this technology, the good and the bad.
This is a call to action, isn't it? We need to be informed, we need to be involved, and we need to be proactive. This is about more than just technology. It's about our values, our ethics, and our responsibility for shaping the future.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that brings us right back to the research paper we've been discussing. You know, the authors, they didn't just create amazing technology, they sparked a crucial conversation. They understood that progress has to come with responsibility.
It's a good reminder that innovation without responsibility is a recipe for disaster. Like, we have this incredibly powerful tool, but we need to make sure we're using it for good. Before we move on, though, I just remembered something. Didn't the researchers actually create the FFHQ dataset themselves?
They did. And that was a huge contribution in and of itself. It wasn't just about finding a bunch of images. They had to carefully put together a data set that was diverse and high quality.
So they didn't just revolutionize how these faces are made, they provided the tools to train those AI models. That's pretty amazing.
It really highlights the importance of data. The better the data, the better the results. And in this case, the researchers really went the extra mile to create a data set that would push the boundaries of what AI can do.
Okay, I'm starting to get the bigger picture now. This isn't just about making realistic faces, it's about building a future where AI can be a force for good.
Exactly. And I think that's a perfect way to transition into our final thoughts for this deep dive. We've explored a lot, from the technical details to the ethical considerations, but what does it all mean for you, the listener?
That's the question, isn't it? We've looked at the how, but now we need to think about the why. What will you take away from all this? What will you do with this new knowledge?
You know, we started by talking about how these AI faces are so real they can fool us. But the real challenge isn't fooling our eyes, it's what's happening in our minds.
Yeah, it's almost like our brains are wired to believe what we see, you know? For centuries, seeing was believing.
Right.
But now that's changing, and that could change everything about how we interact with the world.
It really could.
If we can't trust what we see, what can we trust?
It's a question philosophers have been debating forever.
Yeah.
But AI is making it real and urgent in a way we haven't seen before.
And it's not just faces, is it?
Not at all. Think about all the other things AI is getting good at making.
Oh.
Text, music, art, videos.
The whole creative spectrum.
Yeah, it's like AI is on the verge of this, like, creative explosion.
Right.
And that raises so many questions about authenticity. Who created what, even what creativity means.
Wow. What does it even mean for something to be original if an algorithm made it?
Exactly.
Can AI even be creative, or is it just like mimicking us?
Those are some deep questions.
They are. I mean, if I showed you a painting, right, and said an AI made it, would you look at it differently than if a human had painted it?
That's a really interesting question. I think our gut reaction might be to say, oh, AI art isn't as real or meaningful.
Yeah, I can see that.
But what if we could get past that? What if we could just judge the art on its own, regardless of who or what made it?
It's almost like we have to redefine what it means to be creative. It's not just a human thing anymore. AI's in the game now, and it's got its own, well, style.
It does. But it's important to remember that ultimately AI is a tool,
Right.
a powerful tool, but still a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or bad. It depends on the people using it.
That brings us back to those ethical issues, right?
Exactly.
We have to make sure AI is used responsibly, that it aligns with our values, that it doesn't just make our problems worse.
Absolutely. We need to think about the consequences, the good and the bad, and have these honest conversations about how to manage the risks and make the most of the benefits.
It feels like we're at this crossroads. We have this incredible technology and it could change everything, but we need to be smart about it. Make sure it works for us, not the other way around.
Well said. I think that's a great point to end on. This deep dive has been quite a journey, from the technical details to the philosophical questions and the ethical challenges.
Yeah, it's been a real mind trip. It feels like we just dipped our toes in the water, but it's giving me so much to think about.
Me too. And I hope it's done the same for you, the listener. This is something we all need to be paying attention to. The future of AI is happening now, and we all have a role in making sure it's a future we want to live in.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, stay curious, and be mindful of the faces you encounter, both the real ones and the ones made by AI.